Project managers, and even a lot of project management certification systems, never address how to procure and how to contract things you need for your project. This is amazing because while project managers mostly focus on the delivery of their project, they may need to know about and contract for services, assets, or other resources they need to complete their project successfully. Today, I'm going to break down the procurement process and how it connects to contracts. And before I get started, I want to welcome all of you followers. Thank you so much for subscribing. I hope that I'm adding value to you because, as the Project Skills Mentor, my job is to make you better at your job. I hope I'm doing that. And if I am, please consider subscribing, liking this video if at the end you think it was worthwhile, and adding a comment below how you contract or maybe some contract or procurement challenges you've had. I can answer them. Now, if you want more information on either contracting, procurement, or something else, you'll find that in my link below in the project section of my Project Skills Mentor blog. In that, you'll find my free downloadable that is based on the slides I'm going to show you today. How do we get started? We go big picture. Look at this card. What you need to know at the very beginning is, what are your goals? If you're contracting for services, otherwise known as the buyer, you need to know what your goals are. What's the overall project? How does your company work? And what are you looking for? What do you need to contract for? Maybe it's the entire project end to end. Maybe it's the operation services afterward, or maybe it's a piece of the project. Maybe you're looking for some technical content, or you're looking for some subject matter expertise skills. 2 is understand the market. You want to understand what suppliers are out there, what kind of services or products they deliver, how do they deliver that, and how do they contract for it? What's the price, but also the contract terms? Why do you need to know all of that? Because you're looking for the art of the possible. You don't know at this point what you don't know. So you might go to a supplier you already know about, and they have a pretty standard solution for what you're looking for. But you may want to go to some of the disruptors in the marketplace, people who are doing it completely differently. Maybe that suits your needs better, and maybe it's cutting edge technology that you do or don't want. Knowing that and knowing what the market has to offer is a really important place to start. Next, you want to get informed, and you're going to do that through a procurement process we're going to talk about. But getting informed about what's out there in the market and how well it matches those original goals you documented is important to be informed about the next step, which is deciding who you're going to select as a supplier. Knowing that supplier is really important. So there's a lot of detail there, but once you've selected that supplier, understanding how you're going to use that supplier, how they're going to join your team or deliver to your team, and also how you're going to contract for that work and manage that contract. The process doesn't stop at just procurement. It doesn't stop at just contracting. Most work needs to go through the entire process of procurement, contracting to contract management. So as I mentioned, we need to understand better the procurement process. So let's look at this card now. Here we see a summary of the process. Again, there's lots more detail in my blog, but here's the summary. It starts with the buyer outlining what it is they need based on their goals. So whatever you're buying, you need to be clear about it. And you might actually segregate it into, here's the technology I need, and here's the services I need. You might bundle it together, you might break it apart, whatever makes sense for you. Next, you'll want to do an RFI. Remember I mentioned knowing the marketplace? This is essentially a document you want to send out to as many suppliers as makes sense to find out what the art of the possible is. Here you're checking all of your options by asking suppliers, are they capable of doing the thing you need them to do? Deliver that product, deliver those services, or provide staff to help you land that project. It's essentially a very open-ended document that says something about your company, your project, the goal for the project, and then specifically what you're asking them to do. And on the supplier side, their reply back to an RFI is also very general. They talk about their company, the kinds of things they do, and also what specifically they can do in terms of what you've asked for. So how they map or match to your request. Now the buyer has an understanding of the marketplace. They've looked at all the RFI answers and made a short list. Maybe some that meet the needs absolutely, and some that are interesting to hear more from. From that list, and it might be between 5 and 10 suppliers, you'll want to do an RFQ, a request for quote. Now, a request for quote isn't just asking for a monetary number, how much will this cost? Although that is possibly part of it. What you're really asking for is, tell me more about your ability to deliver, how you'll deliver, and then how much it will cost. Because you need that contextual framework to understand the number they're going to give you in terms of cost, and also how they break that number down. The more insight you get into that, the better. But I will say requests for quotes are generally standard pricing. In that case, you need to take it with a grain of salt. But here's the important point. When you're looking at the scope of what they're doing and how they're doing it, understand if that matches your belief in how you're going to run that project. Maybe your company standards of how projects are run and managed. Maybe understanding if you actually want to increase the scope by increasing the number of people coming in from that company to help you manage and deliver that project. But either way, you're going to want to have a good understanding of the supplier, how they do, what the outcomes are that you can expect from them, and ballpark how much it's going to cost. Now, when you're doing the RFQ, one of the things you might need to start to tell the suppliers about is the procurement process you're going through. It's good to set expectations about timeframes and process. Also, may be handy in the RFQ to ask for an example of contracts, maybe service level agreements. Now, I'll get into those in a few minutes, but what I want to say about that is seeing how they contract can also help you understand a little bit more about the contracting process, but also the company itself. So now you down select again, and maybe from that list of 5 or 10, you're down to 3 to 5. And in this, you want to issue an RFP. Here's an example of what an RFP might look like. It might be a multi-page document, and it not only gives the description of the exact scope, the timing, the delivery, the quality, the specifications, the parameters by which the delivery is made, the acceptance policy, all of that. In addition to all the project content, you're going to want to include more about the contracting, which you may have asked about during the quote process, but now you want to get really specific. If you haven't already received a contract example or a service level agreement example or any other document that you might want, you're going to want a copy of that now. So as the buyer, ask for that information, and if the buyer didn't ask for the information, as the seller, start to provide that information early. Show that you're ready to get to the contracting stage. Now you've gone through the RFP process, and again, you need to have some rigor here. You've gotten all your answers back, and you want to create something like an Excel spreadsheet where each answer has 2 values. 1 of did they answer it, and 2, the weight of that answer. In other words, how well did they answer it? How much does it match your requirements as a supplier? Once you've gone through all of that, you should end up with something like this. On paper, you know about this company. Next is meeting them face to face. When you finally down selected the last few that really answered well, you think are a good fit on paper, the solution looks good, the pricing looks good, all of that works, you're not ready to negotiate yet. Next, you need to meet face to face, whether that's really in the same room or virtually. What you want to do is meet with decision makers from the company who are going to supply you with more details, info, or just review the highlights of their answer. But also you want to meet the people you're going to work with, your project team, the team lead, the technical lead, whoever that is that's right for you. Make sure you meet them and that they get a chance to review their way of working and also what their skills are. You might want to see their CVs or their resumes to make sure they have a good skill match and also the qualifications to do the work. But finally, you need to get a personality match. You don't want to start working with someone that already gives you a headache. So know the team you're going to work with and know that they are amenable to your culture, your way of working, your way of communicating. That's really important. Now you've done this last part, you're ready to select a supplier. But wait. You've got to contract with them. Now what you want to do is have an understanding of the method of buying, so how are you going to buy, and also the contract that goes along with that kind of buying. If, for instance, you have a long-term relationship, a long-term project, or a project with a lot of operational sustainability at the end that you want your supplier to be part of, you're going to want to have an MSA potentially, which is a master services agreement, which is the parent umbrella agreement for all future agreements. These contracts lay out all of the big lines of how companies work together. You also may just need a letter of intent or a memorandum of understanding. Either one of these is the kind of document you can use just to start. It gives some basic terms and conditions just to allow you to start if you really need to fast track that operation and get things going right away. This is basically a placeholder contract for the longer term contracts coming, whether that's a master services agreement or the next one, a statement of work. A statement of work is what consultants often give when they're delivering work for a company using their staff or their technology or their assets. Now, a statement of work tends to be very specific to that project. So unlike an MSA, it's covering something very specific, time-based, value-based, and scope-based. Another option that can go very quickly is a purchase order, especially if you're buying just an asset that has no strings attached to it. The best way to do that might just be a purchase order. And sometimes if you have a statement of work, you'll need a purchase order anyway. Once the project's happening and you're getting bills, you may need a purchase order in order to pay your supplier. And last, you might want to contract about a change order. A change order is essentially a new kind of contract. Something new is happening on the project, not part of the contingencies already embedded in the project and already priced out in some way. This is especially important to understand as a secondary contract if you have, for instance, a fixed price contract. If something changes, you'll need to be paid for that. Otherwise, you can go vastly over budget, both on the buyer and the seller side. So these are the kinds of contracts project managers need to be aware of. The question is, what do you need to know in terms of running your project? Remember, contract management means you need to keep your eye on the prize. So you may have KPIs on scope, budget, time, and deliverables, but you may also need one on contract management. Certainly you'll need to include contract management, if it's substantial especially, in any steering committees or any oversight committees that you meet with. Here are 2 cards I have as part of my downloadable that explain some of those terms and conditions, both for the project view and also non-project contracting terms that are actually important for project managers to know. Project procurement and contracting isn't necessarily something you need to deal with every day, but it's certainly something project managers should know about. And if you want to know more about contracting in detail, check out this playlist where I talk about 2 different kinds of contracting you're going to need to know about. And I hope to see you next time on projectskillmentor.com.